the studio gym where excuses never apply. It's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. While the journey starts out with Victor's desire to stall the progression of blindness, what is discovered in this video is of paramount importance to everybody in the world.
The eye is the only part of the brain that we can see, and we see with our brains, not with our eyes.
One of the doctors you interviewed for the documentary actually went blind in one of his eyes. Tell his story about the whole use it or lose it concept that he applied to regaining his sight.
David Weber, not a doctor per se, but he was a very intelligent man. He was actually written about Dr. Norman Deutsch's book, The Brain's Way of Healing. And there's a chapter on him called The Blind Man Who Learned to See. He had a condition called uveitis, very different than my condition. I have a condition called retinitis pigmentosa. It's seen as a quote-unquote genetic condition. So there's so many different types of blindness. I just want to add, he had a lot of inflammatory issues that he ended up going blind in a lot of his eye. So he ended up using this method called the feldenkrais method, ways to draw blood and circulation into the eye using these various techniques by patching an eye and dysregulating the system by throwing a ball in through one hand and to the other with this patch on, and then taking the patch off after a while, and then it kind of dysregulates the system, so the brain has to sort of work harder. Then after you take this patch off, the exercise of throwing this ball from hand to hand just becomes so much easier. I mean, he uses other techniques as well as like relaxing the eye, which is very, very important. Often we don't realize how much tension we have in the eye brain. So there's certain techniques like palming, which you end up kind of lightly putting the palms of your hands just over your eyes to sort of take off the tension from your eye muscles holding your eyes. And then you kind of realize how much tension you're actually using to hold your eyes in place. Often when you're stressed, you're all focused and your eyes are like zooming in. So again, it's all this unconscious tension. A lot of it is somatic tension too, traumatic energy that's holed up in the system that you're actually giving a chance for the eyes to relax. And often people don't even know what that can feel like. Again, all this stuff is unconscious, and we don't really realize how much is going on with the eyesight for them to actually work properly, just because of the nature of our environment. Especially now, we grew up in an indoor environment under junk lighting, and the only thing that you have to see is probably like 5-10 feet in front of you. You know, you need to look at far vistas for eye exercise. That's the other thing. Nobody's exercising their eyes. We were not taught to exercise our eyes. And like everyone goes to the gym to work out their, arms, legs, whatever. But why were we not taught to exercise our eyes? And that is a major harm in our sight.
And it's so easy to exercise your eyes. We used to call them pencil push-ups. We've talked about them on the show probably 7 or 8 years ago. But you could use your finger. So you take your finger, you move it closer to your nose, you stay focused on it, and then you drop it and stare, and you have to be outdoors. You have to be able to stare at infinity. And you do it again. This is a rep. And you'll feel your eyes literally have a hard time uncrossing and looking at infinity. But the more you do it, the faster that transition goes. The faster that transition goes, the more you're synchronizing the muscles to work properly.
Also in natural light. I know we were talking about that a little bit before the show. Junk light and circadian biology is huge.
Right.
Natural light is so beneficial, and junk light, blue light, does the complete opposite. It just trashes your vision. So, morning sunrise is so important. A lot of infrared spectrum, but this indoor life existence is trashing people's eyes. Not to mention the phones now and LED lighting, which is like a death laser to the eye, and the flicker from fluorescent lighting. It's just the wrong spectrum. It's brutal.
For a long time, it was thought that the brain was static. There was a period of time throughout adolescence that it did all of its great formation, but pretty much after that, it stopped. And there's a lot of research out there that now shows that that's just not the case. So there are some interesting peptides that you have been investigating that help not only neuroplasticity, but may have profound effects on people that have macular degeneration because it may actually reestablish the macular region of the eye. Talk a little bit about that.
I said we see with our brains, not with our eyes. Pineal gland is like a master control for your whole healing body. I think in lizards, if I'm not mistaken, that there is a retina in their pineal gland. So the epithalon has been shown to improve eyesight as well as a bunch of other things. And that's one peptide that I've been working with at the moment, just pretty early in working with it. I was reading a lot about peptides. There's a fellow that I've been working with for quite a while. He's quite amazing. John Ledford Gregory has just been a major help and a major inspiration in my work. He's the one that turned me on to the peptides. There's a retinal peptide bioregulator that was invented again by Professor Cavinson that is showing some profound, I don't want to say full complete reversal, but I've heard people going from 90% vision loss to 30% vision loss, improving. I have issues with night blindness, and my condition also has basically what's the issue with my eyes. I have tunnel vision, so I have no peripheral vision. So they're shown to be reversal in both of those areas, improved night vision and widening of the visual fields. So this peptide is called retinamylin. It's not easy to get a hold of. I know TaylorMade doesn't have this at the moment.
But they could make it because they have amino acid sequencers, so they can make any peptide they want. The reality is
right. I still think they might be having a bit of a time with it, so that's still in the process. Mm-hmm. I did end up ordering it online, the retinal peptide from Russia. I haven't started it yet because I'm waiting for a few more peptides to start this combination. And there's a lot of really great data showing the benefits for, again, age molecular degeneration, which actually has a very similar profile to retinitis pigmentosa.
Right.
And there's also shown improvement in Stargardt's, which is another genetic vision condition. And there's some great clinical trials that were going on in Greece. If you just Google retinitis pigmentosa peptides, there's a study 10 minutes long showing the some data presentation that the guy who wrote the Peptide Revolution book did. So yeah, there's some really great data, and I'm on the verge and cusp of trying these peptides. Like I said, I'm just building my protocol. I just started off with the epithalon first, and I'm going to do a higher dose of that.
I do 5 milligrams of epithalon a night. It looks to me like things that stimulate neuroplasticity are best used intermittently because you turn on the machinery, but then the machinery goes, so what exactly do you want me to build? And your life and your actions will tell the machinery, I need more of these neurons in this area here because this is what I do a lot.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not, like when you go to the gym, you do your exercises. The muscles don't come like right when you're doing the exercises. The muscles come in rest and like a bit after. If you want your eyes to change, they need to see natural light. And I'd suggest working with a holistic optometrist that can actually maybe give you UV transmitting lenses to allow some more light in the eyes. If you want to ease that into it, and I guarantee you'll see an improvement. Okay. Also, highly recommend reading this book. Dr. Jacob Lieberman's Take Off Your Glasses and See, because there is an emotional component to why people's eyes end up becoming blurry, myopic, nearsighted.
There was an interesting segment in your documentary where you were doing something that most people would poo-poo. They go, oh, that's so simple. What's the big deal? But it's an exercise that will actually help some creative thinking and some what's the term I'm looking for? You were looking at a clock, and you had to be able to tell what time the clock says. It was an old-fashioned clock, not a digital clock. How did that affect you over time? You saw some dramatic changes from this very simple exercise.
So that exercise was created by Barbara Aerosmith at the Aerosmith School. It's a proprietary cognitive exercise that you would need to do through that school, which the school is expanding all around the world at the moment. Barbara Aerosmith is a fascinating woman. She's like this woman who changed her brain. She's in my documentary. She herself had so many learning disabilities. She ended up creating these exercises based on the work of Alexander Luria, who is a Russian neuroscientist, I think. So basically, these clock exercises show your. They allow your. It's like time and space. It allows your brain to kind of like, how do I explain this? To get a better understanding of relationships with time, space, and you in the world. So just by doing this repeated action of looking at these clock hands that appear, whatever, you see this clock hand 7:53, so you type it in 7:53. Then another time comes up, and you have to quickly respond to saying what time it is. And over, you do these exercises, and as you advance, they start adding another hand to the clock.
Really?
So then,
Oh, the second hand, yeah. Because I guess the purpose of the exercise was to improve abstract thinking, if I remember correctly, right?
Yes.
And so what changes did you see? So first of all, your ability to respond improved. You got quicker. But what did you see as an after effect in your day-to-day life from doing that very simple exercise?
Well, I had a few diagnosed learning difficulties. I was always horrible at school and in my, relationships with people, communication with people, just general understanding of the world around me.
Do you think that you would have been on the spectrum had you been born today? Asperger's, autistic tendencies. Do you think that if you had been born today and you were a young child, 7, 8 years old now, someone would have said, oh, he's on the spectrum?
Probably. I mean, ADD is apparently on the spectrum. I was diagnosed with ADD.
Okay,
too.
So there you go. So parents who are listening to this show need to really pay attention. That's what I was getting at, because a lot of kids out there, they're going, oh, he's got learning disability, he's on the spectrum. It's like, well, wait a minute. If you said your child has weak legs, they would say, back in the old days, they would have put braces on his legs like they did to Forrest Gump. But
rickets.
But the reality is that if they say, oh, your child has weak legs, they go, okay, we're going to give them supplements and we need them to start going to physical therapy to make them stronger. But there's some sort of stigma. If your child has a weak brain, they go, oh, your child has a weak brain, they're messed up. Forget about it. You did an interesting discussion with a doctor whose last name I think was like Havis.
Professor Maggie Havis, yes.
Yeah. And she actually took a sample of your blood and put it under a dark field microscope, and you saw
live blood analysis.
Yeah, and we did this actually in California about 4 years ago with someone else's blood. And the Rouleau effect is when your red blood cells literally stack up like coins, so you have less surface area for oxygen carrying, and they also increase the viscosity of blood, which means that they have a harder time getting into small blood vessels and stuff like that. And what we discovered at that day was that grounding within like 30 minutes of being grounded for 30 minutes, that reversed the Rouleau effect in this particular subject's blood. But what you guys did was you got involved in a pulse electromagnetic field bed where you were in with red light at the same time. Mm-hmm. And that also caused a reversal of the Rouleau effect. Talk about that a little bit.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm quite EMF sensitive, electrosensitive, or some people are calling it microwave sickness. We are living in a soup of non-native EMF from Wi-Fi routers, your cell phone, cell towers, smart meters, and they're all giving off these invisible, harmful EMFs.
Our computers are giving off non-native EMF right now. The power supplies are. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, all that stuff. I mean, and this has only been introduced in the past, 20 years, and it's getting worse.
Right.
Now they want to introduce 5G, and some cities already have implemented, and that's just a whole other story.
5G is between 10 and 13 gigahertz. It will actually start to stimulate 2 nanometer cilia on the cell surface, and we're going to see a host of new diseases in mass in the population, and people are going to go, I don't understand. We just did a show with Chad Jared, Chad Jared, and we talked about a study that showed that cilia on cell are picking up signals not native to the body and causing the outbreak of mitral valve prolapse we see today in the population. Think about that. And where do you see, especially older men, they all have arrhythmias, they all have mitral valve issues, they all have mitral valve, what's the other thing? Not arrhythmia, but anyway. What's that?
Heart attack issues, heart attacks.
Well, but they have that PVC, preventricular contraction phenomenon. They all keep their cell phones in their top pocket over their hearts.
Such a disaster.
It is.
Yeah, and the thing is, people are so oblivious to it. It's because you can't see it, you can't feel it right away. So people think, it's not harming me when I talk with the phone against It's doing some serious damage. It's not going to burn you like touching a fire right away. That's why it's sneaky. But the thing is, everyone's blood is all coagulated or stuck together in this rouleau formation because of this EMF soup that we're in. Everyone's wearing rubber shoes, and if you're living in a city, how often are people just walking around barefoot? This whole hug a tree thing that the hippies used to talk about, that you're actually grounding yourself when you touch a tree and you're dispersing this charge. Our ancestors were walking barefoot or with leather shoes.
Leather, right.
Leather does ground, but rubber doesn't. So
you're a DJ by trade. There was something else that I thought about that you may not be aware of, but there was a study that came out about 8 years ago when. Maybe it was 10 years. No, it was longer than that. It was probably 12 years ago. A study came out when all the subwoofers were so popular that 60 hertz down to 4 hertz actually causes blood to spontaneously coagulate. And when you think about sand on a metal dish, and you have subwoofers going, how it forms these shapes. It forms shapes, right? Your blood does the same thing when the subwoofers hit your body. Interesting.
Yeah, there's a Facebook, the YouTube video, whatever, of this showing this water dripping down, and then they put this signal next to it. Then the water starts flowing down in this zigzag formation. So it's all sound and frequency. Now we're living in the soup. It's messing everybody up.
Yes.
And when I talk to people about it, they look at me like I'm.
Yeah. Where's your aluminum hat? Right? No, dude. I know because I spent the beginning of my career in radio frequency, in radio land, mobile radio, cellular, and paging. I've seen what RF can do to things. I've seen RF back in the day when MCI Air Signal was the long distance company, and they had microwave 1.4 and 2.4 gigahertz dishes pointing from city to city on top of mountaintops. And there would, whenever you went up there, because we had mobile telephone transmitters up on those mountaintops, there would be dead birds all around the bottom of those dishes because they would land on the arm that held the transmitter. So the transmitter transmits into the parabolic dish, and the parabolic dish shoots a beam 100 miles away. Well, when the birds would land on that arm, they'd be right in the path of the transmitter. It would cook them from the inside out in a couple minutes. They'd just fall dead. They wouldn't even know. They'd be sitting there like this, and then he would just fall down dead. So MCI was contacted by some division of the federal government here in the United States, the Bureau of Land Management, and said, look, you have to put something on those dishes so these birds don't land in the focal point. And that's when they started putting those big fiberglass shrouds on them that look like funnels, so the birds couldn't land on the arm anymore and get cooked.
Wow. Well, there's a story that people in the military in World War II, if they were like going into town after base and they didn't want to impregnate a girl, they'd put their junk in front of a radar. So they'd zap their junk so they become sterile.
Oh,
and that's what's happening when you put your quote unquote laptop on your junk for males and females. You're doing the same thing. At least men, they create sperm every 3 months or something. But women, you have all the eggs with you at the since you're born, and you are trashing those eggs. And don't put your phone in your pocket. Don't put your phone in your bra. I mean,
crazy.
But basically, I know, it's nuts. And everyone's so addicted to the technology. It's handy. I mean, I love my phone too, but we need to practice safe tech, and we need to show this awareness. And there's some great documentary films about this. Generation Zapped is a good one. Beings of Frequency is another really good one that they can watch about the whole EMF situation. There's a lot of people talking about 5G, and there's a major, major push to roll this out fast. And I'm sorry, it is a disaster.
It's going to be. So talk about the EMF. What did you notice after you got – well, first of all, do you know what the frequency was of the PEMF system you used? Was it like 9.6 hertz or 4 hertz? Do you know anything what it was?
I'm not sure the technical it was a Sequix machine made in Italy. Apparently there's like 6 in Canada. It's kind of an expensive PEMF system. I've actually been experimenting with something called the Blue Shield device, which runs on scalar technology, which is not EMF. So EMF does have scalar, but it's like an information code. But the Blue Shield device was invented by this fella, really interesting stuff, that ends up giving this scalar information to kind of override the EMF that we're bombarded with. So there's a portable device, and there's a unit you can get for your home, which blasts like Schumann resonance, Fibonacci, and a whole bunch of other codes that kind of give you this. Your body ends up in training to this than the EMF that you're surrounded with.
Right.
I mean, if people want to look into it, it's I've been experimenting with it, and they've shown animal studies of this device in chicken coops, and the chickens created more eggs with thicker shells. Same thing with cows, producing more milk, because a lot of cows stand on the ground where there's like a ground current, and so they were hooking up these devices with that, and they were showing like lower antibodies in milk. So I mean, animals don't really run on placebo, so these tests were pretty interesting. So I'm experimenting with it right now. I have no affiliation with them. It's just something that I'm looking at.
Is it a company here in the United States? Because I had a guy on recently who actually did a lot of the original research on PEMF for NASA. And I'm looking right now to see if I can find his link. I sent it to somebody. Dr. Robert Dennis? Is it Dr. Robert Dennis? No. This device is not an EMF device, but it is a scalar device. Okay. I have a product that's made by a company called Earth Pulse. And we actually have a $50 off coupon code if somebody goes to superhumanradio.net and you look for the banner ad for Earth Pulse. But Earth Pulse has been the leader in this segment for like 25 years now. And they have a very reasonably priced one. And it goes up to like 22 Gauss. It's like, it's strong, but it's not as, there's some new units coming out now that are like 150 Gauss, you can actually feel the tissue in your body being tugged on. I don't know that that's really a good idea. But the Schumann resonance, as you point out, is the native, as we were talking about before, the non-native RF and EMF. The native EMF is the Schumann resonance, and it goes anywhere from 62 hertz down to a half a hertz, depending on the region of the world you're on. But the average is 7.62 hertz in most of the globe, and that's what I use to sleep with on my Earth Pulse unit at night, because I want to try to recreate that environment that we evolved under.
There's a Magnetico sleep pad, which is pretty popular as well. It's a mattress pad that's has a steady magnet. It's a pretty expensive little mattress pad, but I've heard a lot of major benefit from that thing too. But unfortunately, we need to do these things to help combat this toxic environment that we're living in. Not to mention, heavy metals. Think about that. If you have heavy metals in your system from, drinking bad water, lead, mercury from fillings, lead in the air from gasoline, what happens when you put a fork in the microwave? So if these metals are in your system and you're in an increased microwave field, you're gonna fry yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me, so a lot of the techniques that you've learned about, a lot of the techniques that you've employed, what have you noticed, and what have you noticed in your vision? Both of those things. So what have you noticed cognitively, but what have you also noticed with your vision?
Well, what I've noticed with my vision, I was actually doing a lot of eye exercises. I actually used to wear glasses. And with doing a lot of these eye exercises, I actually decreased my prescription by 33%. Unfortunately, I did get cataract, so they had to replace the lens. So they ended up fixing my prescription as well. But before that, I reduced my prescription 33%. As far as my condition with the retinitis pigmentosa, it does fluctuate. So there's good eye days and bad eye days. I've had far less bad eye days. I stopped wearing sunglasses. I stopped wearing glasses to begin with. Again, I'm protecting my eyes with blue blocking glasses. I need to get a new pair of day pairs as well. But that's kind of what brought me to the next level of my healing with peptides and stem cells, because everyone's talking about how stem cells can reverse retinitis pigmentosa, but peptides, essentially, my theory is that they're precursors to stem cells. So, I'm on the verge of making another documentary with peptides and my journey with them. So I'm looking at getting some guidance from the top players in the peptide world.
We've talked about the effects of psychedelics on neuroplasticity offline. And the good doctor that you went to visit at the University of British Columbia had said, there are no drugs that improve neuroplasticity. And why? And we could postulate why she said that, and maybe she just is not unaware. But some things that improve neuroplasticity without any argument are peptides. But another thing that seems to is psychedelics, especially LSD and peyote and mushrooms and stuff like that. And so, obviously, in your journey, I'm sure you stumbled on this information. You thought, okay, I need to learn more about this. And the go-to approach nowadays is to have a shaman or a guide take you on an ayahuasca journey. And so you did that. Were you afraid? Had you ever? Well, first of all, did you ever trip when you were a kid?
I experimented, recreationally, as they call it, with mushrooms when I was younger. Like 20, around there. I just thought it was fun. I had no idea what, fun in some ways, and sometimes it gets a little weird. But I had no idea until I started reading the benefits on psychedelics and trauma, and and then when I came across the work of Dr. Gabor Mate, he's a national best-selling author, writes a lot about trauma. He's in my film too. He's a big mentor of mine. He was working with these substances in a shamanic setting, in a safe setting. I was completely scared. When I had my wake-up moment around 2011, 2012, where I'm like, I need, I actually discovered, those bits of information at the same time. Like Deutsch's book about neuroplasticity and about the psychedelics with trauma and whatnot at the same time. So it was a pretty interesting, occurrence in that sense. And I thought that I needed something to take me out of my mind.
Or more so out of your mind and body. It's something to actually kind of put you in the zone, if for lack of better terms, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I almost, saw it like as a, defibrillator, needing this, like, something to...
Reset, reboot, yeah.
Right. And, so that was the first time. I actually ended up going to Peru first and working with somebody there, which was not the best thing because he was an abusive shaman, and it's a long story, but he's not with us anymore, thank God. But then I ended up getting I contacted Gabor Mate and ended up working with him, and since then I learned a lot more about psychedelic healing and what MAPS is doing. MAPS is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and all the research they're doing with like MDMA and psilocybin to basically help with depression, anxiety, etc. And these substances, psilocybin is shown to actually increase the birth of new neurons, neurogenesis.
Well, so here's an interesting discussion. So in 1987, I attended a talk put on by Dr. Timothy Leary at UNLV. I was living in Las Vegas at the time. And it was around November, December. It was very cold in Las Vegas. People don't think it gets cold in the desert, but it does. And it was a rainy night. It was the middle of the week, and I showed up to the Artemis Ham Hall, and there was only about 25 people that actually showed up to hear this pioneer talk. And so we were all able to move all the way to the front of this of the right up in front of the stage, and we listened to him talk. Halfway through the talk, he comes down off the stage, and he just leans against the stage, and he talks to us. And then he opened it up to questions, and I had tripped a lot in the 70s as a kid. I mean, a lot. I mean, a lot of people say they tripped a lot, but no, I really, there were weeks where I tripped every day and just didn't go to school. And so we talked about some of my experiences, and he said to me then that they believe that LSD allows right hemisphere and left hemisphere to communicate directly and bypass the clearinghouse that manages right hemisphere and left hemisphere communication, called the corpus callosum, right? He said that taking LSD probably will eventually create a situation where your brain ability to think abstractly goes beyond the traditional human brain's capacity, because you can actually have parts of the brain that deal with speech connect with parts of the brain that deal with color, and you could actually have original thoughts that have never been thought about before. And this could lead through to breakthroughs in technology and so on and so on and so on. Okay, so he told me that back in like 87. Now, fast forward to 2014, I was out at Quest Nutrition again for a project, and I got to sit in on one of Tom Bilyeu's episodes of Inside Quest where Jamie Wheel, I think his name is, spoke.
The flow guy.
Yeah, and so at the end of the interview, Tom was like, Carl, I want you to meet this guy. So I'm talking with Jamie, and I tell him this exact story, and he goes, when was this? I said, it's 87. He's like, they just proved that that's what actually happens last year.
Wow.
He said in 2013 there was a study published that shows that chronic use of LSD causes right hemisphere, left hemisphere to directly communicate and bypass the corpus callosum. And I said to him, so I guess all the acid that Timothy Leary did allowed him to think abstractly enough and connect dots enough to actually realize that back in 87. And he said, yeah, absolutely.
It has some great potential.
Listen, I want to thank you so much for all the hard work you've done.